All right, Shalom to the elect of Israel. Give me 1 second. Babakusha. Salakia. But yeah. So I would like to start by giving all the praises, honor, and glory to whom it rightfully belongs, which is Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Hakodash. And what I said was all the praises, honor, and glory belongs to Yahweh, who is the Heavenly Father, whom the world ignorantly calls God. In the name of the Son, Yahweh Shai, who is the Messiah, whom the world ignorantly calls Jesus. In the name of the Holy Spirit, which in Hebrew is Hakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, never well. Peace, blessings, and salutations to the elect of Israel. And this is going to be, the part two of the three woes that you know, it's going into. Okay, recently. Well, not part two, but part three. All right, because in Revelation, the ninth chapter, right, it's going into, the first two parts was going into verses 1 through 12, which describes World War I, and then World War II in a verse. All right, because the three woes is mentioned in Revelation 8 and 13, and it's talking about the three world wars are to happen upon the earth, which you know in our time World War I and World War II have already passed, right? So we're waiting on World War III, the third woe, you know, and the rest of verse 13, it goes into basically, you say the third woe, okay, yeah, because it goes into the destruction of America, etc. So, um, that let me just get real quick. All right, and I have a playlist on my channel, in case it's the first part of the video you saw, regarding this. So you can just go to my channel, press playlist, to get the background history on how the first woe, which is Revelation chapter 9, verses 1 through 12, is actually talking about World War III. All right, going into the history of it and everything, right? So these woes represent world wars. So this is Revelation chapter 11, verse 14. The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. The second woe, which is talking about World War II, is past. It passed already. And behold, the third woe cometh quickly, the third world war. And we know this word woe goes into basically meaning death and destruction. All right. So let's go back to Revelation 9. All right. So this is the book of Revelation, the ninth chapter, starting at verse 13. So, we read up here. Okay. And now this is the time, we living in. As Apostle Tahar has said previously, in different lessons he's done. All right. I've heard him, say that we're living in basically we're living in this time of the sixth trumpet going into the seventh trumpet. Which the seventh trumpet is when Yahweh Shai returns. And by the way, let me just say before the it happens, but before this cuts off or freezes, if my computer freezes, if I just freeze in the middle of talking, right, or I have to go on mute or something, right, just skip ahead to where I continue to talk, because sometimes my computer freezes in the middle of a lesson. I got to restart my computer, so or somebody comes around, or I have to take a call or something like that, like a very really important call. So if my if so if it just freezes in the middle of me talking, okay, just skip ahead to where the I I continue to talk. The video isn't going to end, all right, until it's finished, Lord willing. But yeah, if I have to go on mute or you know, or I'm not talking or something like that, if I don't say like, hold on, give me a second, when it just freezes, just skip ahead to where I continue to talk. All right. So without further ado, once again, this is the sixth trumpet, right? This is the sixth trumpet, right? And um the seventh trumpet has to do with Yahweh Shai coming back. All right. Let me just get that real quick so I don't forget. All right. First Corinthians 15, verse 58. Oh, not 58, Shalaki. First Corinthians chapter 15, starting in verse 50. Now it says, now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai, neither doth corruption inherit incorruption. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. See, and this is going to be what? When Yahweh Shai comes back at the seventh trumpet. Well, it's going to tell you. All right. This has to deal with when Yahweh Shai comes back, right? We shall all be changed. Let me look this up. Alasso, Strong's G236, Alasso. Okay. It says to change, to exchange one thing for another, to transform, right? And this has to do with the literal transformation of the body. The elect are going to receive new bodies when Yahweh Shai returns, which is going to return in the midst of World War III. So it says, behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Let me look at that word twinkling. Let me look at that word moment and then twinkling, actually.
Strong's G 823. Atomos. Atomos.
Atomos, right? And it says that cannot be cut in two or divided and divisible of a moment of time. So it's going to be like quick, I had to snap just to show you like the quickness, that it's going to be that quick, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Twinkling, right? Ripe, I'm saying that right. This is a throw, stroke, beat, a moment of time, a jerk of the eye, i.e., by analogy, an instant, all right? Like a blink of an eye. And this has to do when Yahweh Shai returns, all right? So let me go back, Slakia. 1 Corinthians 15 and 52 again. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. Okay? At the last trump. Isn't it ironic that this man Trump is in office? All right? At the last trump. Let me just type something on Google. What is the last trump? Let's see. In the Bible. Sometimes when you give exaggerated things in a search bar, it'll give you an AI overview. Now it says in the Bible, the last trump refers to the trumpet call that signals the resurrection of the dead and the transformation of living believers, which really the elect of Israel, at the end of the age. And that's what we get into, the end of the age. The Apostle Paul writes about this event in his first letter to the Corinthians, describing it as a moment that will happen in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye at the last trumpet. All right. So I'm gonna go back to that real quick, just to finish this verse off, get precept, and then go right into it. All right, I was really trying to get into. So 1 Corinthians 15 and 52 again, it says, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. And we're going to be changed how? Who's going to do the changing? Yahweh Shai. Let me get a precept for that. This is the book of Philippians, chapter 3, starting in verse 20. Right? It says, for our conversation is in heaven, from whence also we look for the Savior, the Lord Yahweh Shai HaMashiach, who shall change our vile body. See, the Yahweh Shai is going to do it. that it may be fashioned like unto his glorious body, according to the working whereby he is able even to subdue all things unto himself. So we know who's going to change it, Yahweh Shai. And when? At the last trump, which is when he returns. And now we're going to find, in the midst, well, when, around, what time is he going to return? Because we don't have the exact date, as Yahweh Shai told us in Mark the 13th chapter. All right. But basically, Yahweh Shai, well, not basically, Yahweh Shai is going to return in the midst of World War III. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into it. This is the book of Revelation, the 9th chapter, starting in verse 13 on down. Now it says, and the sixth angel sounded, because, Revelation 8, let me just get it real quick. And starting in verse 1 to 2. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw the angels which stood before the Most High, and to them were given seven trumpets. See? So it was talking about seven trumpets. Now, we go back, Revelation, the 9th chapter, and verse 13. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before the Most High. And as Apostle Tahar, was saying when he was breaking it down, this is basically, the Lord, the Most High, giving the order for something to happen. We're going to read about it, right? Saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Now, where is the river Euphrates at? I'm going to keep that here. I want to come back to that. River Euphrates on map, right? Okay, let me see if I can use this one, this picture. Okay, so River Euphrates is over here in the Middle East. Okay, that's the Euphrates, Now, it says, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Okay, and this does not mean that there are literally angels locked in the river Euphrates. That does not mean that. Okay, right? What it means is that, because I'll read the next verse, because then it kind of helps you understand. Well, it helped you understand, not kind of, but verse 15. And the four angels, which it says, and the four angels were loose, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year for to slay the third part of men. So when you're talking about loosing the four angels, which are bound in the great river Euphrates, when you're talking about loosing them, it's not, once again, it's not that they're under the river, but it's talking about that when this specific time comes, they have a duty that they're going to fulfill, Now, and that duty is what? To kick off World War III, right? Which is going to start out there in the Middle East. That's why it says, which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Because let's look at this word loose, right? Loose.
Strong's G 3089. Luo. Luo.
All right. Let me see. Well, it just says loose one, bound, i.e. to unbind, release from bond, set free, right? Somebody might be like, see. But here's the thing, though. Because how the hell are you going to bind an angel in the water? How the hell are you going to lock an angel down with some chains or something? Where the chains at? All right. And, but if you look up the word bound, deo, right?
Strong's G 1210. Deo. Deo.
Right? It says to bind, tie, fasten, to bind, fasten with chains, to throw in the chains, metaphor, right? It said, but here's the thing: to bind, put under obligation of the law duty. See? So they have a duty, okay? So when we read it again, Revelation, the 9th chapter, and bear 1 second, Revelation chapter 9 and verse 14, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates, right? So when you're talking about loose, because in verse, when you talk about loose, it's talking about that the angels, they had, basically when this time comes, the Lord is going to allow them to kick off World War III, right? Which is going to start off, which is going to start in the Middle East. But in the midst of World War III, America is going to be destroyed by nuclear fire. Okay, so saying when this time comes, the Lord is going to give them the green light, to have this war happen. Okay, to fulfill their duty. That's why it says, verse 15, and the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, so a specific time to do what? For to slay the third part of men. So you see, they had a duty to do, right? It's not that they were locked under the earth, but when the time comes that the Lord has set, right, to bring this to pass, they're going to do it. And the slave, it says, so basically when the time, so Slaki, because I'm fumbling over my thoughts, but it says for to slay the third part of men, because in the Bible you have the sons of God, which is the Israelites, sons of men, which are the other nations, and the sons of the wicked, right, which are the Edomites, okay, the so-called white men. So and when it talks about the third part, it's really talking about America, okay. That's really what it's talking about. You read in the previous chapter. Let me just get it. Right. In the previous chapter, Revelation 8, it goes into, it keeps saying the third part, you know, the third part, the third part, you read about it. All right. It's only 13 verses, but, it's dealing with America, because once again, being that there are three classifications of men in the Bible, and the third classification is talking about the sons of the wicked. And who's wicked? Esau, the Edomites. Okay. So, being that it's talking about the Edomites, where's their main, ruling place at? America. All right. That's the main place that these so-called white people, you know, rule at. This is their main kingdom, America. Okay. So what it's saying is when the time comes, the Lord is going to he's going to allow the angels, which had, to fulfill their duty, which is to kick off World War One, right? Which in the midst of World War One, they're going to shoot, nuclear missiles. Which in the midst of World War One, nuclear missiles are going to be shot on North America, the United States of America. Okay, when this specific time comes, right? This Edomite empire over here called the United States of America. All right, this is what it's saying. Because even when you go to Revelation, the seventh chapter, it says what? Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 through 3. And after these things, I saw four angels standing on the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth. And the wind is talking about nuclear wind. Jeremiah chapter 51 said that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living power. And he cried with a loud voice. So basically, let me just explain this. What this is talking about is the angels, they're not allowing the nuclear destruction to happen just yet. All right. And when you read the next two verses, it's until something happens. Right. So verse 2, and I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, which we know God in Hebrew is Allah, which means power. And he cried with a loud voice to the four angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Okay? So, and when you talk about, seal the servants of our God in their foreheads, basically what all this is saying, that the angels are not going to allow the nuclear destruction to happen until the elect wake up and receive the truth, you know, essentially come up on a level. This is Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 13. It says, in whom ye also trusted after that ye heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation, and whom also after that ye believed, ye were sealed with that Holy Spirit of promise. So once the elect wake up to the truth, right, you know, and come upon a level, they're going to be sealed. So when all the elect wake up and come, when all the elect, wake up, all right, to the truth, all right, and get sealed, nuclear destruction is going to happen. But until then, the angels are holding back the nuclear destruction from happening. See, they're holding back the nuclear destruction in World War III and everything from happening, you know, until the elect gets sealed. So once that happens, right, which the Lord has everything moving on his time, the time that the elect wake up to the truth, the time they get sealed, you know, All of it's moving on the Lord's time. So it's all going to happen perfectly as the Lord has already pre-planned it, predestinated it to happen. All right. So, you know, but before the elect get sealed, all right, the angels are holding back all this destruction and chaos from taking place. World War III, and the destruction of America. All right. Which, once again, in the midst of World War III, America is going to be destroyed. So let me read Revelation chapter 9, verses 13 on down again. Revelation chapter 9, starting in verse 13. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before the Most High, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, a specific time, for to slay the third part of men. Okay, so it's a certain time period. It's a certain time. It's like it was a certain time that the Lord is going to allow the angels to kick off World War III, which ultimately which is going to start in the Middle East. All right, which the river Euphrates is in the Middle East. All right, and in the midst of World War III, America is going to be destroyed. All right, because it's prophecy. Verse 16. Now listen. And what is America going to be destroyed by? Nuclear fire. And it's about to go into it right now. Verse 16, it says, and the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000. And I heard the number of them. Now let me just look something up. Let me just see if it says it here. Okay. Let me just see. No, they don't have it here. All right. Anyways, let me just see something. All right. So to understand this horseman, because look, let me show you something. This is what Christianity thinks this chapter is going to go into. Let me just type Revelation 9 depiction. Because of course, they're going to put Christianity's they're going to put Christianity's idea of what Revelation 9 is talking about, because Christianity is a widespread lie. All right. They think something like this is actually going to come up out the ground or something, and start tormenting people for like 5 months. We already went into what this is. This is a lie right here. Okay. This is a lie. This is not happening. Okay. Christianity doesn't get it. All right. They don't get it, man. Okay. Sixth angel, Revelation 9. Let me see. This is what they think is going to happen. And ask the Christian, to break down Revelation, the ninth chapter. Tell them to explain it. They can't. At least they're not going to do it the right way. So, but it says, verse 16, and the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. So to understand this, you're going to have to understand Joel, the second chapter. All right. So I'm going to read Joel chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. All right. So, because what we're reading Revelation 9 right now, this is going into the day of the Lord. All right. The day of the Lord is going to come in the midst of World War III, and it's specifically going to come, all right, in the midst of World War III, when America is when nuclear missiles are shot on America. When that time comes, that's the day of the Lord, and Yahweh Shai is going to be back by then. Okay. So this is the book of Joel, chapter 2, starting in verse 1. This is going into the day of the Lord here, because now it's going to the nuclear missiles. Joel chapter 2, verse 1. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm on my holy mountain. And this is what the prophets are doing. Okay. Let me get another precept real quick. Isaiah chapter 58, verse 1. Okay. And it says, cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet. See, that's what we do when we go out there in the on the street corners and teach and prophesy. That's what we do. Okay, and that's all we do. People want to come at us, and all we're doing is speaking words, and it hurts. It hurts people. That's how you know the words we speaking is backed by Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, because these words that we speak actually hurts people, man. You know, like it makes them. It doesn't make it makes it makes them get angry, makes them get emotional. Sometimes, if they're of the elect, if the elect come across the word, they're gonna wake up to it. It might get cut at first, but they're gonna repent. Take it as they should. You know, but for these people in the world, they can't stand these words. Okay, it's Isaiah chapter 13. Starting from the top, verse 2. The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz did see. Lift up a banner, which is the scriptures, upon a high mountain, America. Exalt the voice unto them. Shake the hand. That's what we do when we go out there on the street corners and teach. We exalt the voice. We speak loud. You always hear people saying, those Hebrew Israelites who always yelling on the corners, and the shaking the hand. That's, a physical hand gesture that we do, a hand movement. You hear brothers speak and they might, shake their hand. You see? We get another one. Proverbs chapter 1 and verse 20. It says, wisdom crieth without, and without means outside. Okay, let me just prove that. Strong's H 2351. The Hebrew word is chawataza. Chawataza, right? Outside, outward, street, the outside. Okay, so everyone, trying to look at us because, thinking we're ghetto because we're out there on the streets. Well, the scripture says wisdom cries without, right? Crieth meaning what? Let me look this up. Renan, right? Or wait, is that? Yeah, Renan, I think. Yeah, Renan. To cry out, shout for joy, give a ringing cry. Yeah, you know, to give a ringing cry, man. Okay? Wisdom cries without, she uttereth her voice in the streets. Yeah, so, you want to find the true wisdom, you're going to have to go to the men of the Lord, starting with our apostles and elders of Great Millstone, GMS, and the like minded brothers that teach the same doctrine under them. All right, which we put these lessons up online, and we also go out on the street corners and teach and prophesy, all right, about the things to come and about these scriptures. That's what we do, all right. So if you want to try find a true wisdom, you're gonna have to go to them. You have to go to them while you still can, all right. And the time is running out for that. But it says she crieth in the chief place of concourse, okay, which is like down to look up that word concourse, it talks about the downtown areas and everything, and the openings of the gates in the city she uttereth her words, saying, all right. But just going into that, that street ministry. So when we go back to Joel 2, this is blow you the trumpet of Zion and sound the alarm on my holy mountain. This is going into the ministry of the prophets. Okay, because now in these days, what the prophets are out there on the street corners teaching, prophesying, right? Of what the day of the Lord. Okay, as it's going to tell you right here, let all the inhabitants of the land tremble. These people, are to be afraid. Why? For the day of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai cometh, for it is nigh at hand. So the day of the Lord is near. And as Apostle Gabar said, the day of the Lord is when those nuclear missiles are shot off and the chariots return, and the chariots come. That's the day of the Lord. All right. And it says, for it is nigh at hand. All right. And this day is going to be a very, very, it's not going to be, a good day for the world. Verse 2, a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains. Right? Because what? Basically, all this is saying is that it's going to be a dark day. Okay? It's going to be a dark day when that happens. Okay? That's what it's saying. You know? It says a great people and a strong. So remember, like in Revelation 9, where it talked about and the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. Okay, it says a great people and a strong. So it's not literally talking about people. It says there hath not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. Okay, so this is not talking about literal people. It's talking about nuclear missiles. Okay, a great people and a strong. There hath not been ever the like, because these nuclear missiles, right? They're being made to be used one time, and after that, never again. That's because scriptures talk about ain't gonna be no more war. The nations ain't gonna learn war anymore, right? Let me get this precept real quick. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 54, verse 16. And it says, "Behold, I," talking about the Lord, Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, "have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work. And I have created the waster to destroy." So, you know, hey, the Lord has put it in the minds of these Edomite scientists to bring forth these nuclear missiles, to create these things. Okay, so they're really the Lord's weapons, as it says in the book of Isaiah, 13th chapter, right? Isaiah chapter 13 and verse 5. They talking about the nuclear missiles come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even Yahweh, even the Lord, and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. So it's talking about the nuclear missiles, right? They are his weapons, the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. All right. So this is talking about nuclear missiles. What you're going to see is going to describe it in the next verse. But there's great people in the strong is talking about nuclear missiles. They've been made, and the rest of it is talking about how they've been made to use one time, be used once, and after that, never again. Verse 3, and they're going to be used on the day of the Lord. Verse 3, a fire devoureth before them, right? And as a brother looked it up, you go into the word before, right? Let me slack here. It's panyam, right? And before it says face, 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 but then also in front of, okay? In front of. Let me go back. All right, so this says a fire devoured before them and in front of them. That fire now is telling you what this is, okay? And this is talk once again talking about a nuclear ICBM. What is an ICBM? You should be familiar with that term already, but ICBM is short for an intercontinental, which means being shot across continents, ballistic missile. Okay, it says is a land-based nuclear-armed missile. So this is a nuclear weapon, a weapon that can wipe out cities, nations, neighborhoods. States, countries. That's what it can do. It says with a minimum range of 3,400 miles, designed to deliver nuclear warheads to targets across continents. All right. Now it says these powerful strategic weapons are a key part of the nuclear deterrent for countries like the United States, Russia, and China. And by the way, when we go into Revelation chapter 9, verses 13 through 21, this is future prophecy. Okay. This is future prophecy. I remember in verses 1 through 12, that already happened. All right. So, there's more historical document on it, but this we're living in this time period now. Okay. Um, so when we go back to Joel 2, right? Oh, real quick. So there's an ICBM now. Let me just type this in real quick. How does an ICBM work? Okay. Let me just get a quick picture. All right. I'm gonna go actually online on the Wikipedia and get this. All right. Now here's the thing. Okay, so as you see, we're gonna come back to this picture actually, but as you see, this is how it works, man. All right, so boom, it's launched, it goes up into the air, comes back down. You see, but then it breaks off into little parts. It breaks off as it goes up and down. All right, but the fire that devours before them is talking about the cone of an ICBM. Okay, because this is where the fire comes from. All right, let me just type this in real quick. Let me see. Right? It says an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, works by using powerful rocket boosters to propel its warhead into space. Remember that it said that. After which gravity takes over, sending the warhead in an unpowered ballistic trajectory to its target on Earth. Right? So let me just get a picture of the ICBM. Okay. Um, uh, All right, I could use this. Okay. I'm gonna type this in, by the way. I'm at it. Hold on. Where does the fire from an ICBM come from? Right. No, I'm gonna just type it in plainly. Does the fire of an ICBM come from the warhead? No, it's talking about missile launch right there, right? But here's the thing. Let's read this. It says, "No, the visible fire associated with a missile launch does not come from the warhead, but rather from the rocket engines of the booster stage." See, so this is the when it says no, it's not saying the fire doesn't come from the front of the missile. This is talking about when it blasts off right here. But listen, it says the warhead contains the nuclear explosive. See, the nuclear explosive that would cause a massive explosion upon detonation at the target, not a continuous burn like fire during flight. So really, I'm gonna type what is explosion. Let me type that. Probably say it better. I was breaking down to you what the in Joel 2 what this weapon is. It says yes, the destructive explosion of an ICBM comes from its nuclear warhead, which is designed to detonate and release its explosive or toxic material upon reaching its target. The ICBM itself is a missile system that transports the warhead. So the I when you hear the term ICBM, it's really it's the missile that transport the front of the warhead. Let me just get this real quick. ICBM, okay, it's really this whole part right here. When it's put together, from this 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, and 9. All right, that is the ICBM, and the warhead is up here. Okay, so that's how it works. Now let me just type in nuclear warhead. All right, just so you can understand. And these nations amongst the world now, as we speak, they have these weapons. Okay, they have these things. All right, let me just they don't really give me. I mean, this works. You know, but yeah, for example, right? This is the warhead up here. This is the nuclear warhead. This has the explosive power in it. And guess what? It's at the front of the ICBM. The rest of this is the ICBM. Okay. See the nuclear warheads, they're at the front. They're in the cone of the ICBM at the front. So when we read Joel 2, it says a fire devours before them or in front of them. Meaning what? It's talking about the nuclear warhead. Let me type this in. What is a nuclear payload? Mm, all right. It says what it is. The warhead. This is the core explosive device that contains the fissile material like uranium or plutonium or fusion fuel designed to undergo a nuclear chain reaction. All right. This is what the Lord is going to use to bring about the end of this man's rulership, man. The nuclear missiles. Now going back to Joel 2, it says a fire devours before them. So now you understand what that is. It's talking about the nuclear warhead in the front of the ICBM. It says, and behind them, a flame burner. So behind the nuclear missile, right? Let me just look up the word behind, just so we understand. Achar, all right. And as you see, as after the following part, behind of a place, hinder afterwards, behind, behind, from behind. So you get it, you know. And behind them a flame burns because what? See, that's that fire that's talking about the fire that launches the nuclear missile. Okay, the ICBM. That's the fire that it takes from the you know propulsion to propel it. Let me just back. All right, and that's why I said remember this part. It says no, the visible fire associated with the missile launch does not come from the warhead, but rather the rocket engines of the booster stage. What is a booster stage? Right? It says booster stage. The initial fire you see comes from the massive rocket engines of the missile's booster stage, which provides the thrust to launch it into the air. Once the booster has done its job, it falls away from the rest of the missile. So that's the fire that it takes to, for blast off of the ICBM. All right. So, and it's at the underside of the missile. It's behind the whole ICBM. All right. You know, this right here. That's the fire, but and behind them a flame burners. So Joel chapter 2 and verse 3, continuing on, it says the land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and the land is talking about America, right? As the Garden of Eden before them, meaning before they get to the land of America, before they hit, it's going to basically be like a regular day. And you also, have you have vegetation, plants growing and stuff like that. And you have different places around America like that, right? But it's going to be like a regular day, you know, cars going up and down the street, etc. Right? That's going to be before they hit. And behind them, a desolate wilderness, meaning after they hit, a desolate wilderness. Okay. Let me look at this word desolate. Shemama. I'm saying that right. Or Shama. Shemama. It says devastation, waste, desolation. Listen real quick. Desolation. It says a state of complete emptiness or destruction. You know, you think about it. You know, uh, it's like a wasteland, pretty much. Okay, desolation. You know, desolation, emptiness, like a desolate wilderness. Didn't I just say that? Let's see what else it has down here. Didn't it just say that? And after behind them a desolate wilderness. Didn't it just say that? Hold on. Yup. Joel 2 and 3. And behind them, meaning after they hit a desolate wilderness. That's an example right there. So after America, hold on. That's a good example. Instead of desolate wilderness, this is literally a picture off of Wikipedia titled Desolation Wilderness. All right. So basically, after the nuclear missiles hit America and the fire and smoke clears, America's going to be one big desert. There's not going to be any skyscrapers, ain't no highways or roads or road signs, billboard, none of that. It's going to be a desert. Okay. So it says, yea, and nothing shall escape them, right? Because it's going to come, and you're not going to have any, people like you see in these movies, you know, um, coming up from under a rock somewhere after everything is done, surviving it, in a bunker coming up. No, if you're in the land of America, all right, when it was after the, during the nuclear destruction, and you're not beamed up, you're done. You're cooked. You're cooked, man. Verse 4. Now listen, because remember Revelation 9 said what? And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them, right? Joel 2 and 4. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. So it's not that they're saying these are literal horsemen. It's given a simile. Remember what they tell you in school, a simile was comparing something to each other using the words like or as. Okay, but not literal horses or horsemen, right? It's talking about as, they're, you know, it's basically power, okay? Because horse represents power. So shall they run. And thing is, you think about like, a bunch of nuclear missiles being shot off, right? Um, you know, you think about it being shot off. It's like a bunch of horsemen, running one after another in the battle. See, Verse 5, like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame. So, like the noise of chariots on the top of mountains shall they leap. Because what? Um, Let me just type this in. All right. So when it says leap, it's talking about a flight. Because when you leap in the air, like Apostle Dahar said, you're basically jumping. You're going up, you're coming back down. So I typed in when the ICBM is in air, what is it called? Or it says when the ice, let me just type something into like, what is the arc? All right. So that was going to something else. It says when the ICBM is in the air, it is it its detached warhead is called a re-entry vehicle during the terminal phase, while the entire missile's flight is described by its boost phase, mid-course phase, and terminal phase. The mid-course phase is a significant portion where the missiles travel outside the atmosphere. Boost phase. This is when the missile's rockets are firing to accelerate it, provide initial velocity. So when it blasts off, mid-course phase. After the boost phase, the missile continues on its trajectory, primarily outside the Earth's atmosphere. This is the longest phase for an ICBM. When it's going up, when it's basically because blast off is the boost phase. Mid-course phase, right, is when it's already in the air, traveling, outside Earth's atmosphere, right? In terminal phase, it says this begins when the detached warhead re-enters the Earth's atmosphere and continues until it impacts a target. So when the nuclear warhead detaches and falls to the Earth, so it's going up and down. And it says the term for the warhead, the re-entry vehicle. During the terminal phase, the warhead is often referred to as a re-entry vehicle. It is designed to survive the high speeds and heat because when you're going back to the Earth, you see in different movies like Man of Steel, falling back to the Earth, you pick up speed and heat. You see it on like fire and stuff like that falling to the Earth. It says in heat of re-entering the atmosphere to reach the target. Let me just see some real quick. All right, let me get a picture. You know, it's you see here. This is how that arc. You see the launch, the boost phase, then it goes up and outside the Earth, and then detaches. The terminal phase, which is the nuclear warhead detaching from the whole ICBM and falling down. So when we go back to Joel 2 and it says, "Shall they leap?" That's what it's talking about. It's describing a nuclear missile. So like the noise of chariots on tops of mountains, because when it goes through the air, it makes that sound. It's not just dead silent when it's flying. No, it makes that like that rocket sound. Okay. And it says what? Like the noise of a flame of fire that devoured the stubble as a strong, so the noise once again as a strong people set in battle array. Yeah, as not saying these are people, it's not literally a person or a bunch of people. It's likening it to that, right? Before their face, the people shall be much pained. When these people see this, when these people see the nuclear warheads in the atmosphere, they're going to be very, very uh, horrified, man. They're going to be scared for their life. Where are you going to run? And when nuclear missiles are, coming, where are you going to run? You know where you can run. What you going to run aside? What's that going to do? I mean, look, and it says all. Let me just read the rest of it. All faces shall gather blackness, 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 blackness. Reward, reward. I'm saying that right. But going down here, it says all faces withdraw brightness, i.e., grow pale with terror. All right. So it's dealing with people being scared. And the same thing is reiterated in Isaiah the 13th chapter. a little bit, right? Continuing on though, I'm gonna have to get up out of here in a minute. Verse 7, they shall run like mighty men. Once again, taking off. Think about, men like running into war and everything. You know, horsemen, going into war. Think about the nuclear missiles launching off after the other and everything. Right? You got multiple because they come out of silos. Look that term up. They come out of nuclear silos. Okay, you know. So you think about nuclear silos, a bunch of them blasting off. It's like a bunch of horsemen rushing into war one after the other. It says they shall climb the wall like men of war, and they shall march everyone on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Give me 1 second. Yeah. So like when it says they shall run like mighty men, they shall climb the wall like men of war. It's just talking about when the fire of a nuclear missile spreads through the city, buildings and all of that, burning everything up. All right. Let me just type this in. Clear fire throughout the city, and this fire is going to be when you know as it says in Second Peter 3, it's going to burn the elements. It says a nuclear fire throughout a city is an event called a firestorm, which is a massive conflagration of smaller fires that can occur after a nuclear explosion. This intense fire creates its own wind, heats the air, and reduces humidity, with conditions inside the fire zone making it only weakly influenced by external weather. All right, let me get a picture. All right, you know, so think about it like this, right? You see the impact. You see the city around it. Now the fire spreading all around and getting all up in there, right? That's what it's talking about. Well, 2, it says, and they shall march everyone on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Because when they're in the air, right, it's going to be not just one nuclear missile to destroy America. No, it's going to be a bunch of them. So when they're in the air, they're not going to run into each other. Okay, they're not going to run into each other. You know, because the Lord is going to take control of these missiles. All right, this is a day the Lord has set up to come. All right. By the way, this is a good image. Once again, this is the warhead up here. This is and what's under here, you know, is the you know, what's inside of this cone does the damage. Okay, and this the rest of this is the ICBM, and you see the fire, a flame, uh, and behind them a flame burning. All right, this is the fire in front. This is the fire behind. Okay, back in Joel 2, verse 8. Neither shall one thrust another; they shall walk everyone in his path. So they're not going to run into each other. It says, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. So when the nuclear missiles, because America's going to try to use its nuclear defense systems. Okay, American nuclear defense system, right? It says the U.S. nuclear defense system includes the ground-based mid-course defense, which is GMD for short, system for homeland protection against ICBM. So this is talking about a system, right? It says for homeland protection, so a system within America for protection against these ICBMs. Regional systems like THAAD and Aegis for short to medium range missiles, and a future concept called the Golden Dome for long range of hypersonic threats. And this is the thing: these countries, they have all these different types of ICBMs, and these ICBMs can move at different speeds, man. Some can be quicker than others. All right. There's going to be a bunch of countries. Okay. It says that the overall strategy also involves space-based sensors and radars to detect and track potential attacks, and a layered approach to intercept threats. All right. We'll say, regional systems like THAAD. Let me look some of these up real quick. All right. THAAD missile defense system. There's the THAAD terminal high altitude area defense system. is a U.S. ground-based missile defense system designed to intercept and destroy short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles in their terminal phase of flight. All right, this is America has basically something to go up in the air and shoot the missile down before it hits. Okay, as you see here, you know, man, it goes up, hits the missile, bam, so it doesn't affect. Because see, this it says defend the asset. They're trying to protect the cities and all of that. So we'll go up, go up, go up, bow. Try to hit the missile, right? Um, the other one is called Aegis. Just type that in. Aegis missile defense. It says the Aegis defense system is a sophisticated combat management system primarily used by the U.S. Navy on Arleigh Burke class destroyers and Ticonderoga class cruisers. These are different Navy ships that integrates radar. Hey, brother, if you're watching this, Navy carrier back. All right, that's an inside joke. All right, but it says that integrates radar computers and weapons to provide both anti-air and ballistic missile defense. So this is one used by the U.S. Navy pretty much. All right, I guess they basically do the same thing at sea, you know. And then they said the other one was what? And a future concept called the Golden Dome for long range or hypersonic threats. Because what is a hypersonic missile? What is a hypersonic missile? Because a hypersonic missile travels at speed of Mach 5, which is 5 times the speed of sound or faster. It says it's highly maneuverable in the atmosphere and can fly at lower altitudes than ballistic missiles, making it difficult to detect and intercept. Because if it's going fast, the system, the defense system is going, how the hell you going to catch that at Mach 5, man? So it's different. So different missiles that can go at different speeds. Let me look at this Golden Dome now. Golden Dome for America. Trump said he wanted to do this. Look this up. It's at LockheedMartin.com, right? Golden Dome for America. Golden Dome stands as a layered defense shield, safeguarding the American homeland with unwavering precision, ensuring the security and resilience of our nation. Right? Let me go back. All right. Like how Israel has their dome. All right. This is something Trump wanted to do. Okay. Uh, this is literally him. Hold on, in the White House with it. You know, it's something he wanted to do. Still wants to, I guess. This to protect against nuclear destruction. So this tells you that nuclear war is imminent. It tells you that it's close. They're talking about something like this, man. Okay. It says President Donald J. Trump, this is a very dangerous world. We're going to protect our citizens like never before. And you got this. So let's see if there's any news on that. All right. But basically, when Joel says that when they talk about the missiles fall upon the sword, and they, come down, it says the sword being the missile defense systems, they shall not be wounded. Meaning what? All these missile defense system America has is not going to work in that day. This is a prophesied day to come. Doesn't the scripture say the Lord don't lie? All right. So think about it. If these missile defense systems were to work, that would make the Lord a liar because America would not be destroyed on that specific day. It's a specific day that the Lord wants America to be completely destroyed. Okay. So these missile defense systems ain't gonna work on that day. Verse 9, it says, they shall run to and fro in the city. They shall run up upon the wall. They shall climb upon the houses. They shall enter in at the windows like a thief. Okay, and once again, the fire spreading all throughout the city and all of that. Going all up in the buildings and climbing over, walls and through windows and all of that stuff. Okay, that's what it's talking about. All right, this day is coming. Where are you going to run in an event like that? Look at that. Look at that, man. And then the next verse, you see the background is very dark. You know, it might be daytime, but it's dark, because of the nuclear fire and the smoke. Joel 2 in verse 10. The earth shall quake before them, because it's going to shake. When he's Isaiah 24 and 20, it says, the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. Once again, it's going to be because of the smoke and all that. It's going to be a dark day, even though it might be uh, light outside. The smoke and all of that is going to cause it to look dark. See, verse 11: and Yahweh shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great. Talking about the army and camp, talking about nuclear missiles, right? For it says, for he is strong that executeth his word. So the Lord is the one that's going to bring it to pass. For he is strong that executeth his word. For the day of the Lord, see, we're talking about the day of the Lord, is great and very terrible, and who can abide it? Meaning, it was so bad, like who's going to be able to withstand in that day? And only the elect, because the elect are going to get delivered, man, by Yahweh Shai. You see, so when we read back in Revelation 9, it talks about horsemen. It's talking about nuclear missiles, and it says, and the number of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. Okay, and so this is 200 million, and really, it's talking about 200 million nuclear warheads. All right, because multiple warheads in one ICBM. So imagine if all these countries gearing up their ICBMs. You got I mean, this number this is the prophesied number of warheads to hit America. All right, it's going to hit it with all of them going to hit within 1 hour. So verse 17 it says, it says, and thus I saw the horses in a vision, and then I sat on them having breastplates of fire, because the nuclear missiles. All right. Well, Slag says, of having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and brimstone. That's what's coming from the nuclear missile, fire, brimstone. And the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions. It's talking about the nuclear warheads were as the heads of lions, because what is a lion? A lion is ferocious. Okay. Look at that word, ferocious. Savagely fierce, cruel, or violent. And that's what's coming. That his nuclear missiles is going to be very cruel and violent and fierce. Okay. When it hits, people are going to feel it. They're going to feel that, man. It says, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. See, this ain't talking about some type of weird looking horse. This is talking about a nuclear missile. What's going to out of their mouths? Still talking about the warhead. The script. Just remember, this is the Apostle John back then describing these nuclear missiles as best as he could. They didn't have the term ICBM back in the ancient world. They didn't have that. They didn't have the term nuclear warhead. Intercontinental ballistic missile. They didn't have that term back then. All right. So out of their mouths is talking about the warhead once again. Verse 18, by these three was the third part of men killed. So my Esau. So by these three, what? The fire, by the smoke, and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. This is what's gonna be. This is what's gonna come to take out America with these nuclear missiles. This is what's gonna end this place. Verse 19, for their power is in their mouth. Right? It says, and in their tails. So their tails are like on the serpents. Because what? When a nuclear missile goes through the air, it does that. You can look at videos online of them making that squiggly pattern, man. All right. It's like a snake. All right. And remember, okay, ICBM. All right. Don't look. It's this whole thing except for this black part up here. This whole thing down here. This is the ICBM. This is what delivers this part up here. Okay, that's where the damage comes from. That's the fire in front of them. That's the flame that down here will be the flame that burns behind them. You know, this whole thing is the ICBM. So when it goes up in the air, flies through the air, it's like it like squiggles a little bit. It's like a snake. You know, Apostle John was shown all of this. Right? It says, for their tails were like on the serpents. Right? It says it had heads. Nuclear warhead. And with them they do hurt. That's where the damage comes from. So you see, and these are going to be used in the midst of World War III. Okay. Now, before I go to the next part, right? Let me just get something real quick. James Bible Online. All right. This is the book of Second Ezra, chapter 7 and verse 48. No, hang on, just preach in a minute. Second Ezra chapter 7, verse 43. But the day of doom shall be the end of this time. The day of doom is, or doomsday, in other words, is when the day when America gets destroyed, which is going to be in the midst of World War III, right? When America gets destroyed by these nuclear missiles, that is going to be the end of this time, or what? The end of this age. Okay. And what did it say the last trump was again? In the Bible, the last trump refers to the trumpet call that signals the resurrection of the dead and the transformation of living believers at the end of the age. And what did the scriptures say? Your Esau is the end of this world or the end of the age, meaning he be ruling at the end of the age, at the end, at the end of the world and get taken down. And Jacob is the beginning of it that follow it. And the Israelites, all right, the Israelites' kingdom is coming next. The Israelites are going to be the next ruling power over the world. You see? So when this happens, when World War III and that day America is destroyed happens, that is going to be the end of this current age of the white man as a rulership. And what? And the beginning of the immortality for to come, where incorruption is past. So even though that day comes, that ain't it. Some people think when those nuclear missiles are shot off, that's the end of the earth. No, the earth abideth forever. That's the end of this man's rulership. There's a whole other side after this, a whole better, greater side after this, man. Okay, so it said the day of doom shall be the end of this time, the end of this age, right? And what's so in the last trump? Remember, that's when Yahweh Shai returns. Get it again. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 2. It says, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So this is proof that when the day of the Lord comes, that day when America is to be destroyed by nuclear fire, on that day, Yahweh Shai is going to return and beam up his elect. Okay? The elect are going to receive those new bodies. All right? On this day that America is destroyed. And this makes perfect sense as to why in 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, it says this. Verse 18. And if the righteous scarcely be saved, I mean, like almost not, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? See? Because basically, it's going to be something like to where, the elect, they basically almost, it's like they're going to almost not make it. They're going to make it. They're going to get delivered and be on a chariot, but it's going to be like they almost didn't. All right. So it's going to be, it might be, for example, they on the ground and then they see, the nuclear, basically they might see the nuclear missiles falling. And then as Apostle Tahar said, just feel their bodies being lifted up into the air, you know? So this all shows you that on the day America is destroyed, that is when Yahweh Shai is coming back. Now we don't know exactly when that day is, but we know it's going to happen in the midst of World War III. All right, when the war is officially kicking off, we in the midst of Jacob's trouble, all of that. All right, so you know, and what we're reading here is a sixth trump, right? But it said in the last trump, right? That's when it says the dead, Yahweh Shai. Basically, Apostle Paul wrote the First Thessalonians 4. That's gonna and that's the thing, man. That's how you know this Lord is man, because Apostle Paul, he wrote these things thousands of years ago. But these things, basically, all right, some of these things that he wrote thousands of years ago pertains unto today. All right, speaking about things that happen in this time we're living in. you know? So, hey man, you know, so it's just like wow. All right. But and then, so on this day, when the nuclear missiles are shot off and everything, it's going to be a whole bunch of countries shooting nuclear missiles on America. All right, a whole bunch of countries. All right. But you know, yeah. So when this happens, Yahweh Shai is going to come. All right. So Revelation chapter 9, the chariot, they're going to be uh, in a chariot watching the elect are going to, not get hit by the destruction. They're going to get beamed up into the chariot. Right. Going to be looking at the destruction. Psalm 91 and 8, Revelation 15, 1 and 2. Okay. They're going to be in a chariot up above the firmament looking at the nuclear destruction. Right. So verse 20, it says, and the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, because look, you're still going to have people living in America. Well, I'm Slocky. Whoa. No, I take that back. Slocky, that was Satan. You're not going to, even though this destruction is going to happen, you're still going to have people that live in other places around the world outside of America. Even Esau, you know? And this proves that everybody ain't going to die. You got that whole notion in the world, like everybody going to die, et cetera, et cetera. No, they're not. All right. So after the nuclear destruction, are you still going to have heathens and stuff, Esau, whatever, you know, around the world doing all types of wickedness. Revelation 9 and 20. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk, neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. See, so this is after the nuclear destruction. You're going to have people around the world, outside of America, all right, that are still surviving. So meaning that the elect, all right, are will survive at a point in time. The elect are going to come down out of these chariots, out of the chariot. However, might be one big chariot the elect are in, right? And they're gonna and they're gonna enslave the heathens as it's written, okay, including Esau, you know, etc. So that's basically it, So this is like after World War III, you know. This is talking about the third woe, you know. So but let me read Revelation 11 and 14 again, okay? Because what we just read is going to be happening during the third woe, okay? This is Revelation 11 and 14. And the second woe was past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. As I read about the seventh trumpet, I'm going to just read verse 15. And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his anointed, and he shall reign forever and ever. So there you have it. That's pretty much it. All right. So I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. So we just went over what's going to be happening, in the midst of World War III, which is the day of the Lord. Okay. Where the nuclear missiles are shot on America. It's going to come a certain point in time. The Lord is going to give the angels the green light to, um, cause the war in the Middle East to happen, the war of Armageddon. All right. And in the midst of the war, nuclear destruction is going to happen. You see? And Yahweh Shai is going to come back, right, and save his elect, deliver his elect. And Jacob's trouble is going to be going all in the midst, but Yahweh Shai is going to come back in the middle of all of that and deliver his elect. And America's going to be destroyed, man. And afterwards, after however long, the elect are going to come out of the chariot and go around the world enslaving the nations, setting up the kingdom of Israel. All right? So with that, giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone that were well. Peace, blessings, and salutations to the elect. Shalom to the elect.